Claire Morgan couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed down on her chest and made her restless. She had gone downstairs to get a glass of water when she heard it, a low murmur of voices drifting from the living room. At first, she thought maybe the television had been left on, but as she moved closer, she recognized the tones. It was her husband, Daniel, speaking in a hushed voice. And beside him, she could hear Rachel, his younger sister. Claire froze at the hallway corner, hidden by the shadows. Her heart began to beat fast, not from fear of being caught, but from the strange tension in their whispers. She leaned closer, pressing her palm against the wall to steady herself. "She's too trusting." Daniel's voice came cold and certain. "Once the money's secured, she'll be out of the picture." Claire felt her whole body stiffen. Her husband's words pierced her like a knife. Out of the picture? What did he mean? Rachel gave a soft laugh, the kind that always carried a sharp edge. "I told you she was an easy target. She's been so blinded by love that she doesn't even notice what you're doing. Once the inheritance is in your name, she won't stand a chance." Inheritance. The word rang in Claire's ears. Her father had passed away not long ago, leaving her his savings and the family property. She had trusted Daniel when he told her not to worry about the paperwork. She had believed him when he said he only wanted to help her through her grief. Now, in the darkness of the hallway, she realized that help had been nothing but a mask. Her breath came shallow and fast. She wanted to rush in, confront him, demand to know why the man she loved would speak about her this way. But her body refused to move. Instead, she stayed there, gripping the wooden frame of the wall until her fingers ached. Rachel's voice rose again, softer this time, almost smug. "Mother will be so proud once this is over. She never thought Claire was good enough for you. And now we'll make sure she has nothing left to hold on to." Claire's knees felt weak. Evelyn, Daniel's mother, had never hidden her dislike for her. But this was worse than dislike. This was cruelty, a plotted betrayal. She tried to swallow, but her throat was dry. Her ears buzzed, her body heavy, as if she were underwater. The man she had trusted with her heart, the man she had leaned on during her hardest days, was planning to strip her of everything. For a moment, she wanted to believe she had heard it wrong. Maybe she was imagining it, twisting their words in her mind. But then Daniel spoke again, firm and final. "Don't worry. She won't see it coming." Claire clutched her chest, as if to hold her heart in place. Tears blurred her vision and she stumbled back, careful not to make a sound. The conversation in the living room continued, but she couldn't bear to listen anymore. She crept up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When she reached her room, she shut the door and pressed her back against it. The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable, spilling down her cheeks. Her whole world had just shifted. The love she thought she had, the marriage she believed in, now felt like a cruel joke. But even as she sank onto the bed, trembling, something inside her hardened. They thought she was too trusting. They thought she was blind. They thought she wouldn't fight back. Claire wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Her voice was a whisper, shaky but steady. "We'll see about that." She broke down in silence, her body shaking, but her mind refused to surrender. Somewhere beneath the pain, a spark of determination burned. She would uncover the truth. She would not let them destroy her. A self-made woman, Claire Morgan had worked for everything she owned. She was not born into wealth or comfort. Her childhood had been simple, with parents who taught her the value of hard work. Her father, a carpenter, always reminded her that talent meant nothing without discipline. Her mother, who passed away when Claire was a teenager, left her with the lesson that kindness and determination could open doors money never could. Growing up, Claire never had much. She wore second-hand clothes, shared textbooks with classmates, and sometimes helped her father in his workshop after school. But she carried a dream in her heart, to build something of her own, something that would prove she was capable of more than what people expected from a small-town girl. After finishing college, Claire threw herself into interior design. She started small, decorating local shops and homes, often working long nights and accepting less pay just to build her portfolio. Slowly, her hard work paid off. Clients began to notice her unique style, her ability to mix comfort with elegance. Word spread, and within a few years, she opened her own boutique interior design business. It was modest at first, but soon her designs were being featured in lifestyle magazines. For the first time, Claire had money in her account and confidence in her future. Then her father passed away. Losing him felt like losing the last anchor of her childhood. The grief was sharp, but he left her with something precious, his savings and the family property, the old house where she had grown up. It wasn't just money. It was a piece of him, a gift to help her stay secure. She promised herself she would protect it, no matter what. Daniel came into her life during her rising years. He was handsome, charming, and ambitious in a way that drew people in. When he looked at her, she felt like the most important woman in the room. He spoke about big dreams, about building a future together where nothing would limit them. Claire believed him. She had spent so long building her career on her own that it felt good to finally lean on someone who promised to share the burden. But Daniel's charm had shadows. He was ambitious, yes, but his plans rarely worked out. His businesses failed, his investments disappeared, and yet he always managed to convince Claire that the next idea would be different. He often joked that Claire was the serious one, while he was the dreamer. At first, she laughed at his words. But over time, she noticed how he dismissed her achievements, how he teased her for working too much, how he insisted she relax while he made promises that never seemed to hold weight. Still, she loved him. She told herself every marriage had flaws. What she couldn't ignore, however, was the way his family treated her. Evelyn, his mother, wore disapproval like a crown. She never hid the fact that she thought Claire had trapped Daniel. Rachel, his younger sister, followed in Evelyn's footsteps, often making sly comments about Claire's clothes, her voice, even her business. To them, Claire was an outsider, someone who didn't fit their idea of who Daniel should have married. They saw her as the woman who pulled him away from them, who dared to build her own success instead of depending on him. Claire tried to win them over at first. She bought gifts, offered to help Rachel find work, even invited Evelyn to join family holidays. But nothing worked. Their smiles were always fake, their compliments laced with poison. Daniel brushed it off, telling her not to take it personally. "They'll come around," he said, but they never did. After her father's death, Claire found herself leaning on Daniel more than ever. She was grieving, vulnerable, and she believed his comfort was genuine. He held her hand during the funeral, whispered that he would take care of her, and promised her she would never be alone. That promise blinded her to the warning signs that had always been there. Daniel began to push her in subtle ways. "Why don't we merge our accounts?" he suggested, smiling as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We're married now. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours." When the lawyer came to discuss her father's estate, Daniel discouraged her from hiring her own. "No need to waste money," he said lightly. "I can handle everything. You should just focus on healing." At the time, Claire thought he was protecting her. Looking back, she realized he was protecting his own plans. Little by little, control slipped from her hands. She found herself agreeing to things she never would have agreed to before. She told herself it was part of trusting her husband. That's what love was, wasn't it? Trust. But behind his warm smiles and tender words, Daniel was weaving a net she couldn't see. A net meant to catch everything her father had left for her, to pull it away piece by piece until she was left with nothing. And Claire, still hurting from her loss, didn't yet know that the man she loved was preparing to betray her in the cruelest way possible. Claire discovered the truth by accident. One quiet afternoon, while Daniel was out, she went into his study to look for a receipt she needed for her business records. Daniel usually kept papers scattered across the desk, and Claire often teased him about being disorganized. She was sorting through the pile when her eyes landed on a thick envelope marked with her late father's name. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a legal document. At first, the words blurred together, but as she read carefully, her heart began to pound. It was a transfer of ownership. The family property her father had left her was listed there, but the name written as the new owner was not hers. It was Daniel's. Her hands shook as she looked closer. Her signature was on the page, but she had never signed it. The writing was hers, yet not hers. A forgery. Claire's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, the room spun around her. She remembered the whispers she had overheard that night. Daniel telling Rachel she was too trusting. Rachel laughing about her being blind. At the time, Claire had prayed it wasn't true. Now the evidence sat in her trembling hands. When Daniel came home later that evening, she could barely look at him. But the anger boiling in her chest refused to stay silent. She waited until dinner was over, then brought the document into the living room. "Daniel," she said quietly, holding the paper. "What is this?" He glanced at it and smiled too quickly, as if trying to stay calm. "Where did you find that?" "In your study," she replied, her voice tight. "Why does this paper say you are the owner of my father's property? And why does it have my forged signature on it?" Daniel leaned back, his smile fading into irritation. "Claire, you're overreacting. You don't understand how these things work. I was just preparing the paperwork for us. For our future." "Our future?" she whispered. "By stealing my father's house? By pretending I signed something I didn't?" He sighed, running his hand through his hair. "You're too emotional. You're still grieving, and it's clouding your judgment. Everything I do for us. For our family. Can't you see that?" His words cut deep, gaslighting, twisting her pain, making her feel foolish for even questioning him. She wanted to scream, to demand how he could lie so easily to her face, but the calm way he spoke, the casual dismissal, made her realize something even more frightening. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was planned. Her trust shattered in that moment. The man she had loved, the man she had believed in, was not just careless or weak with money. He was a thief. And worse, he was willing to destroy her to get what he wanted. Claire stared at him, searching for some trace of the husband she thought she knew. But all she saw was a stranger sitting across from her. A man who had been hiding behind charm and smiles while plotting to take everything from her. Her throat burned with unshed tears, but she forced herself to stay composed. She realized if she exploded now, if she revealed just how much she knew, Daniel would only become more careful. He would cover his tracks, maybe even find another way to strike before she was ready. So she nodded slowly, pretending to accept his words. "Maybe you're right," she said softly, lowering her eyes. "Maybe I'm just too emotional." His shoulders relaxed. He reached out and touched her hand, giving her a reassuring smile. "Of course you are. That's why you need me. Trust me, Claire. I know what I'm doing." Trust him? The thought made her stomach twist. That night, when Daniel fell asleep, Claire lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her chest ached, but her mind was sharp. She knew now that the whispers were real, the insults, the plotting. Daniel and his family wanted her inheritance, and they would stop at nothing. But Claire also knew something else. If she allowed her pain to control her, she would lose. She had to be smarter, calmer, and quieter than them. She turned her face into the pillow, silent tears wetting the fabric. The heartbreak was heavy, almost unbearable. Yet under the pain, a decision settled inside her. She would not confront him again. Not until she had proof strong enough to destroy every lie. Daniel thought she was blind, too trusting, too soft to fight. He was wrong. Claire whispered to herself in the darkness, her voice barely audible but firm. "I will not let them win." And with that vow, she began her quiet war. Claire noticed the change almost immediately. After finding the forged document, she began watching Daniel and his family more carefully, and it didn't take long before their boldness showed itself. Evelyn, who once saved her sharp comments for private moments, no longer bothered to hide her dislike. At family dinners, she insulted Claire openly. "You may have a business," Evelyn would say with a thin smile, "but a wife's real duty is to keep her husband happy. Daniel looks tired. Maybe you should focus less on decorating strangers' houses and more on your own." Daniel never defended her. He would either laugh or change the subject, as though his mother's cruelty was harmless. Claire would sit there, her hands tight in her lap, swallowing her anger. She wanted to speak up, but she knew better now. Silence gave her more power than shouting. Rachel too grew bolder. She started showing up at the house with expensive handbags, jewelry, and shoes that Claire knew Daniel could not afford. Rachel bragged about them, saying, "Daniel knows how to treat his sister." She would wink at Claire, daring her to question it. Claire stayed quiet, though inside she was boiling. Then came the pressure. Daniel began bringing home new legal papers, asking Claire to sign them without reading. "It's just a formality," he would insist. "Trust me, it's for us, for our future." His voice carried the same smooth confidence as always, but Claire no longer believed it. She read every line carefully, refusing to sign, giving excuses like, "I need more time," or "I'll ask my accountant." Each time, Daniel grew more frustrated, but he forced a smile, trying to mask his impatience. Slowly, Daniel also started cutting her off from her support. Melissa, her best friend, had always been someone Claire leaned on, especially after her father's death. But Daniel began making it harder for them to meet. "Why does Melissa come around so often?" he asked one night. "She's always filling your head with doubts. A real friend wouldn't interfere in a marriage." Another time, when Melissa called, Daniel answered the phone and told her Claire was busy, though Claire was sitting right there. Later, he explained, "I just didn't want you to get worked up with her negativity. She's not good for you." At first, Claire thought Melissa might not notice, but Melissa did. One afternoon, she came by unannounced and Daniel wasn't home. She hugged Claire tightly and whispered, "Something's wrong, isn't it? You don't look like yourself." Claire almost broke down then, almost told her everything. But the fear of alerting Daniel kept her silent. She only smiled weakly and said, "I'm fine, just tired." Melissa gave her a doubtful look, but let it go for now. One evening, while Daniel was in the shower, Claire slipped into his office again. She knew it was dangerous, but she needed answers. She opened his desk drawer and found bank statements. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. The numbers hit her like a slap. Large withdrawals, transfers to accounts she didn't recognize, and payments for expensive items she had never approved. Rachel's gifts suddenly made sense. Evelyn's smug confidence had reason. They were living off her money. She put the papers back carefully, her heart racing. She wanted to scream, to throw the evidence in Daniel's face, but she forced herself to stay calm. If she revealed her hand too soon, he would cover his tracks, and she would lose her chance to stop him. But Daniel had his own tactics. Almost as if he sensed her slipping away, he began mixing cruelty with affection. One night, he would shout at her for questioning a bill, his face dark with anger. The next night, he would surprise her with flowers, a dinner reservation, or whispered promises of love. "I love you, Claire," he said one evening as he pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You're my whole world. Don't doubt me." His touch still stirred something inside her. A memory of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who once made her feel safe. And for a moment, her resolve wavered. She wanted to believe him, wanted to close her eyes and pretend everything was fine. But then she remembered the forged document, the whispers in the dark, the missing money. Every time she felt weak, those memories dragged her back to the truth. This wasn't love. This was manipulation. Her nights grew sleepless. She lay awake while Daniel slept soundly beside her, torn between her heart and her mind. One part of her still saw the man who had held her hand at her father's funeral. The other part saw the stranger who was stealing her future piece by piece. She lived in constant fear that one wrong step would give her away. Yet she also knew she was running out of time. Daniel and his family were growing impatient, bolder, more careless. If she didn't act soon, she would lose everything her father had left her, and maybe even herself. Claire stood at the bathroom mirror one morning, staring at her tired face. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. But in her eyes, hidden beneath the sadness, was a spark. They thought she was weak. They thought she was easy to break. They were wrong. From that moment, she knew she had to move faster. She had to gather proof, find allies, and prepare for the fight of her life. Because if she didn't, Daniel and his family would leave her ruined. And she refused to let that happen. Forged signatures, secret meetings, stolen money. Everything began to connect when Claire finally decided to act. She could not fight this battle alone. Quietly, without telling Daniel or anyone else, she reached out to a discreet lawyer recommended by Melissa. His name was Mr. Harris, an older man with sharp eyes and a calm voice. Claire met him in a small office across town, away from places Daniel might know. She laid out the documents she had found, the bank statements, and told him everything she had overheard. Mr. Harris listened carefully, then nodded. "You're right," he said firmly. "This is fraud. He's forging your signature, moving your money, and trying to take your inheritance. But there's more here. Let me dig deeper." Over the next few weeks, Mr. Harris uncovered the full scheme. There were several forged signatures, not just one. There were secret meetings Daniel had attended with his mother and sister, meetings to plan how they would use Claire's money once it was in Daniel's control. Worst of all, there was a hidden plan Daniel had written down with another lawyer, a draft divorce agreement. Once the property and accounts were in his name, he intended to leave Claire, filing for divorce and ensuring she was left with nothing. When Claire read those papers, her heart broke all over again. But this time, instead of drowning in pain, she felt something new: strength. She knew what she had to do. She bought a small voice recorder and began to secretly capture their conversations. Whenever Daniel or Rachel let something slip, Claire kept her face calm, but her fingers pressed the button inside her pocket. Soon, she had hours of evidence, proof that their whispers had not been her imagination. Then when she felt ready, she set the trap. She invited Daniel, Evelyn, and Rachel to dinner at the house. She made sure the table was set beautifully, the food warm and inviting. She even dressed in one of Daniel's favorite dresses, pretending to be the obedient wife they believed she was. As they gathered around the table, Evelyn gave her usual smirk. "It's about time you learned how to host a proper dinner," she said. Rachel laughed, twirling a gold bracelet that Claire now knew had been bought with her own stolen money. Daniel looked relaxed, as if everything was under his control. They ate for a while, small talk filling the air. Then Claire put down her fork and looked at them one by one. "There's something we need to discuss," she said, her voice calm but firm. Daniel frowned. "Now, can't it wait?" "No," Claire replied. "It can't." She reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. "I know about the forged signatures, the secret meetings, the divorce papers you've been hiding." The room went silent. Evelyn's face tightened, Rachel blinked in shock, and Daniel's jaw clenched. "What are you talking about?" Daniel finally said, forcing a laugh. "Claire, you're imagining things again. You've been too stressed." Claire met his eyes, steady and unblinking. "Am I?" She pulled out the recorder, pressed play, and let their own voices fill the room. First came Daniel's voice. "She's too trusting. Once the money's secured, she'll be out of the picture." Then Rachel's laughter. "Mother will be so proud. She'll have nothing left to hold on to." The sound filled the dining room like a storm. Evelyn's face turned red, Rachel's smile vanished, and Daniel shot up from his chair. "That doesn't mean anything," Daniel shouted. "You twisted it. We were just talking." Claire calmly opened the folder and slid the forged documents across the table. "Then explain these. Explain why my signature appears on papers I never signed. Explain the divorce draft you've been hiding." Rachel slammed her hand on the table. "You're pathetic, Claire. Always acting like the victim. Daniel deserves better than you." Evelyn sneered, her voice sharp. "You think you're clever, but you're just a silly girl who doesn't know how to keep a husband. If you'd been a proper wife, Daniel wouldn't need to protect himself." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes dark. "You don't understand, Claire. Everything I did was for us. You're too emotional to handle money. I was securing our future." Claire's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "No, Daniel. You were securing your future. Without me in it." The mask Daniel had worn for years cracked. His face twisted with anger, his charm gone. "Fine," he spat. "Maybe I was. Maybe I don't want to spend my life with someone who doesn't trust me." Claire stood, her heart pounding but her spine straight. "You lost my trust the moment you betrayed me. And now you've lost everything else too. My lawyer has copies of all of this. Tomorrow we begin the legal process. You won't touch a single cent of my inheritance." Evelyn screamed, Rachel cursed, and Daniel raged, but Claire no longer listened. For the first time in months, she felt free. The web of lies had been torn apart. The marriage, the family facade, the illusion of love, all of it shattered in that dining room. And though Claire's heart ached, she knew she had won the most important battle, the fight to protect herself. Claire moved forward with divorce proceedings and legal charges. With Mr. Harris guiding her, every step was clear and safe. He made sure Daniel could not touch her inheritance. The forged signatures, the secret meetings, and the stolen money all became evidence. Piece by piece, Daniel's plans fell apart. At first, Daniel tried to fight back. He begged, then threatened, then begged again. He told Claire she was making a mistake, that she would regret leaving him. But Claire no longer listened to his words. The man she had once trusted was gone. All that remained was someone who had used her love as a weapon. Evelyn and Rachel also tried to interfere. Evelyn stormed into Claire's boutique one morning, shouting in front of customers that Claire was destroying her son's life. Claire simply turned to her and said, "No, Evelyn. Daniel destroyed it himself. She walked Evelyn out calmly, her dignity intact, while customers whispered in shock. Rachel flaunted less now. Her expensive jewelry and handbags suddenly disappeared when money stopped flowing her way. The same people who once admired her began whispering behind her back, calling her greedy and shameless. For Daniel, the humiliation came fast. Friends distanced themselves, business partners pulled away, and his reputation sank. The charming man who once walked with confidence now struggled to meet people's eyes. Claire, meanwhile, began to breathe again. For months she had carried secrets, fear, and betrayal like heavy stones on her back. Now each day of legal progress lifted some of that weight. One evening, she sat with Melissa and finally told her everything. The whispers she had overheard, the forged papers, the gaslighting, and the betrayal. Melissa's eyes filled with tears as she listened. Then she hugged Claire tightly. "You should have told me sooner," Melissa whispered. "But I'm proud of you. You're stronger than you think." Claire cried that night, but the tears were different. They were not tears of weakness, but of release. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe with someone, no longer carrying the burden alone. Instead of collapsing under the pain, Claire threw herself into her work. Her boutique became her sanctuary. She poured her energy into designs, meeting clients, and building new projects. Slowly, her business began to grow even more. People admired her strength, and some even whispered that her struggles had made her work deeper, more heartfelt. Every cushion she arranged, every wall she painted, every room she designed carried a piece of her healing. Through her art, she was reclaiming herself. Daniel's downfall continued. The court froze his access to her inheritance, and soon his debts caught up with him. Without Claire's money to hide behind, he struggled to pay bills. Evelyn and Rachel, who once stood proudly by his side, began to fight with him instead. Their unity broke apart, each blaming the other for their failure. Claire watched from a distance, not with joy, but with a quiet sense of justice. She had not wished for their suffering, but she knew they had earned it. Their schemes had backfired, leaving them exposed to the world. Her own life, once filled with fear and doubt, began to glow again with hope. She was no longer the woman hiding in the hallway, trembling at whispers in the night. She was stronger, wiser, and free. And though the wounds of betrayal still ached, Claire knew she was walking a path her father would be proud of, a path of courage and dignity. Claire sits alone in her father's old study, the room that still carried his scent of wood and books. The desk was covered with the same scratches from his tools, the same papers he once worked on late at night. In her hand, she held a photo of him smiling, his arm around her younger self. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were soft, not heavy. She touched the frame gently and whispered, "I kept it safe, Dad. And I kept myself safe too." The words felt like a promise finally fulfilled. She had fought to protect the inheritance he left her, but more than that, she had fought to protect her own heart and dignity. The pain of betrayal was still there, like a scar, but it no longer controlled her. She felt peace knowing she had survived and reclaimed her power. A few weeks later, Claire stood in front of her boutique at its grand reopening. The windows shone with new displays, her designs brighter and bolder than ever. Balloons decorated the entrance, and laughter filled the air as clients, neighbors, and friends gathered to celebrate. Melissa was there, smiling proudly, her arm linked with Claire's. Other friends who had once worried about her now surrounded her with warmth and support. They toasted to her strength, to her business, to her new beginning. Claire stepped inside, the sound of voices and music wrapping around her. She felt the weight of her journey, the shadows of betrayal, but also the light of survival. She had been broken, but she had rebuilt herself. As she looked around her boutique, her work, her passion, her future, she knew this moment was not just about business. It was about dignity, renewal, and freedom. For the first time in a long time, Claire smiled fully. She was no longer a victim of Daniel's lies. She was her father's daughter, a self-made woman, and a survivor ready for the next chapter of her life. Hey loves! Thanks so much for sticking around till the end. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button. See you next time. 2 hearts.